All right, for more reaction in this developing situation, we bring in our hockey analyst, Dave Poulin. And Dave, are you surprised Columbus ownership is sticking with the management team that actually put them in this situation?
They've been very loyal to both John Davidson and Jarmo Kekalainen throughout their stretch. I think it still remains to be seen, Jay. I don't know if that's all done yet. I'd be asking some very hard questions. Who first brought up the idea of hiring Mike Babcock? Like, where did that first get mentioned? Who was that person? And then my next question would be, who challenged that? And what was the process they went about? And how much research or due diligence did they do on what he would have done to change his ways while he's been out of the game? So right now, we think it's all status quo in Columbus, but I'm not sure it's done yet. And I would be sitting down and asking those exact questions to figure out how something went so wrong so quickly.
And Dave, you're not sure it's done yet when it comes to the management group and the ownership situation. What about the dressing room itself? I mean, Boone, Jenner, and Gaudreau seem to be, at least publicly, okay with how Mike Babcock conducted himself in these players' meetings. The players clearly were not happy about it. So do you see this as a potential issue in the room going forward?
I would address it right away if I were that room. If I were Boone Jenner as a captain, I would close the doors in that locker room once the team is established, and I would clean it up right away. Because that needs to be a culture change. There's no question about it. It's the biggest thing. When a coach comes in, when new management comes in, they talk about a culture change and the need for a culture change. Well, it didn't even get to that. Didn't get for a chance there to be trust between the coach and the players. And the most important 2 minutes for a coach in any sport, Jay, is the 2 minutes after he walks out of the locker room. What happens at that point? Who's the first person to say something? Does it support what the coach said? Or does it challenge what the coach said? And then what's the chain of events after that? So it never even got to that point. Mike Babcock didn't even get a chance to establish the locker room. And it's tough. I think it's tough with today's athlete. You've got to instill some things, and you've got to be tough in the manner you do it. Just take discipline. So how do you instill discipline in a player? You get him to do something that he really doesn't want to do, or maybe has never been asked to do, or hasn't had to do. And most of these guys, an elite 18-year-old hockey player, 19-year-old hockey player coming to the National Hockey League, Jay, no one's ever said no to him because no one's ever had to say no to him. He's been the best at everything he's done. And so that saying no part, instilling discipline, all those things, there's a different way to do it. And that's what coaches have to find today. They have to find a different way to get their messaging across. And Mike Babcock clearly was not able to do that. He didn't get a chance to do it. He was off the chart before he even got in the locker room with the way he was trying to do things.
Dave, I think you can make a pretty strong argument that after his time with Detroit, Mike Babcock had a good shot at the Hockey Hall of Fame. Based on everything that happened in Toronto and now obviously with this latest incident in Columbus, has Mike Babcock completely obliterated his chances of getting into the Hall?
I think it'll still be a discussion. There'll still be a group amongst the decision makers that want to look at his track record. And you could argue with the great teams he had in Detroit that he should have won more. You know, he won one Stanley Cup with some of the great teams put together through that time frame. He can coach hockey, there's no question about it. But in that discussion amongst those decision makers in that room, and I know many of them, there'll be some really hard questions asked, Jay. And, you know, and when the time comes, when that name does come up in front of, you know, the decision makers, it's not going to be a slam dunk by any means.
Dave, stick around because training camp, of course, begins for all 32 NHL teams this week. And we've got some tough questions involving Canadian teams for Dave. That's coming up later on this edition of SportsCenter with Jay Onrait.